Once again, hello everybody, and thanks for being here at M365 Philly. We have some really good topics today, and next up we have Shabazz from our sponsor, Synology. Just a reminder, these sessions are being recorded, and if you have any questions, please use the Q&A. We are having some issues with the Q&A at the moment, so we're trying to get to them as best as we can, um, but we haven't been able to get them right away at the moment. So this next session, we're going to be educated on retention policies and disaster recovery plans. So welcome team, and glad to have you with us today, and you can begin when you're ready.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason, for that introduction. So I'm a technical account manager with Synology. And yeah, today we're going to be talking about understanding threats and implementing a recovery strategy for your cloud data. So I want to start things off with a case study that is based off a healthcare treatment center. They had a combined 40 servers and virtual machines, 250 user accounts for Microsoft 365, and 5 PC workstations. They worked with us to set up a primary backup on site, which we then also backed up offsite via the cloud. But wait, is it really necessary to back up data from cloud services like 365? Don't they already do that? Well, in today's session, we're going to be talking about who's responsible for your cloud data. Is it necessary to back up the cloud? And how to protect your cloud data with the backup. Our first section will be on understanding data retention and backup policies. So the pandemic impacted a lot over the past couple of years. It really pushed us to adopt cloud platforms like Microsoft 365 in our regular day-to-day. And now, even more critical data lives in the cloud, like your emails, team folders, contacts, and important data that can be based on your customers and users. I wanted to stop and take a quick poll of how many of you guys are currently utilizing cloud service like 365 in your organization. Yeah, you guys can raise your hands. Oh, there. Nice. Okay, okay. I would hope so. In a 365. Perfect. Awesome. Now, here's a graph on how responsibility is essentially shared for your stored data. The blue represents you, but as you can see from the chart that we have here, all the information that's stored, where the information is accessed, and who has authorization to the data is ultimately your responsibility. So what does that mean? Well, software as a service providers like Microsoft are in charge of storing your data and ensuring you have an interface to interact with that data. But it is your responsibility for what data you store and who has access to that data. Data protection is your responsibility, and software as a service companies would not be liable. And if that does not convince you, here's a section of Microsoft's own terms of services about their service availability. We recommend that you regularly back up your content and data that you store on the services. And you should have a regular backup plan, as Microsoft won't be able to retrieve your content or data once your account is closed. So even Microsoft, in their own words, are recommending that you have a disaster recovery plan in place in case anything were to happen to your data stored in the Microsoft 365. Let's talk about why we would want to back up cloud data. We'll start things off with malicious deletion. Let's talk about a real life scenario that happened to an IT consulting firm based out of California. They had a contract to migrate a client's Microsoft 365 data. The employee assigned to the task had received a number of complaints from the client and was removed from the project. They were eventually sacked not long after. That employee who still had access went in and deleted over 1,200 Microsoft 365 accounts. The deletion was of course linked back to the employee, and they were sentenced to 2 years in prison for computer crimes. But what kind of havoc did this cause for the client? Well, the employees could not access any of their email, contacts, or documents. Vendors and consumers were unable to get in touch with the clients. And the company was at a complete standstill for 3 months, costing them over $550,000 in lost revenue. That kind of loss did not need to happen. If a proper backup and disaster recovery plan was in place, they could have stopped the attack by identifying the compromised accounts and blocked the attacker from doing damage. Then they just need to identify the missing and deleted data and ultimately determine what needs to be recovered. Then simply restore the data and then get the company back up and running. Some best practices we can take away from that scenario is to regularly review access permissions of your employees and outside contractors. Also, you want to enable two-factor authentication for employee accounts, especially those with admin permissions. And lastly, you want to implement a backup plan for data and cloud services and understand your recovery time goals, as well as your capabilities. Now let's cover the second reason for backing up your cloud data, and that's accidental deletion. And you can admit it, it's happened to all of us at one point or another. Let's dive into what happens to your email when it gets deleted. Once an email is deleted from your inbox, it is moved to the deleted items folder where it stays for 14 days. After 14 days, the email then goes to the recoverable items where it will stay for another 14 days. And after 28 days, the email then gets deleted from the server. What does this mean? Say you have an employee that deletes an important email. At that moment, they have 14 days to restore the email from the trash. Say they forgot for those 2 weeks, that email is then placed in the recovery folder for 14 days. And if they ultimately end up forgetting for that almost month time, after 28 days, that email is then permanently deleted from the Microsoft server and is now completely unrecoverable. Now with Microsoft 365, you can customize your retention policies, but even those have their limits. For example, you can customize your total retention up to 30 days, but after that, no more. The other option you have is via legal hold, though that would require time and effort to get into place and may require litigations. Let's go over what you can do to avoid accidental deletion. So you can run backup tasks, make sure the data is backed up and ensure everything is in place before setting up retention rules. You can schedule a time for maintenance and ensure that proper maintenance is being set aside for during normal, essentially outside of business hours, and make sure that it's not being done during the peak hours of the day. And lastly, you're going to be able to recover from the accidents if there's an issue. And that way, any type of purged or compromised data, you can just recover it from the most recent backup. Now, some best practices we can take away from this is to thoroughly evaluate data retention options of your cloud service and customize settings according to your needs. Again, find a suitable backup and recovery solution for data in those cloud services. Now, for the final reason why you would want to back up data from the cloud, we're going to be talking about long-term archiving. With that, I wanted to start things off and show you a case study for a school that benefited from implementing a Synology backup strategy. Vocational college based in Tampere, Finland. They have approximately 18,000 students and 1,000 staff members. They have over 60,000 email accounts, 30,000 Drive accounts, and 10,000 SharePoint sites in their Microsoft 365 educational environment. The students and faculty use M365 to store important data like student records, faculty files, and other educational content. Now, for this data, they did have a legal obligation that required them to hold on to it for many years. This ultimately led to larger subscription costs for the college to keep those files, even of those who no longer attended or worked at the college. And if they chose not to renew the subscription for those former faculty and students, that data only remains with Microsoft for 90 days. After that period, the data is then permanently deleted. Let's look at vocational colleges' situation. They're currently keeping all their data in Microsoft 365, which as a pro allows them to access the data from that original location. But as a con, they're paying that per user subscription, even for those no longer affiliated with the college. What they wanted to do was export their data to a third-party solution that, though may require a bit more time pulling that data back and recovering, would ultimately save them on costs, as they would only have to pay according to the storage space. So if we revisit the case with the vocational college, they choose to maintain an on-premises backup for their Microsoft 365 accounts. This allowed them to remove former faculty and students from active 365 subscriptions and ultimately save on their costs in the long term. Let's look at how they deployed their solution. They backed up all their accounts, both former and current users. They then removed the former users from their subscription so that they no longer had to pay for those accounts. And lastly, the solution allowed them to be prepared so that in the case they needed to restore data, they could readily do so when needed. So some best practices we can take away from this case study is to really understand obligations to retain data generated by your employees or other accounts. In this particular situation, they were locked in by the FERPA guidelines for education, where they had to essentially make sure that they kept storage and essentially data and information from those former students from those many years. And then ultimately, you have to develop a strategy to satisfy those data retention requirements using built-in tools or third-party solutions. Coming back to that healthcare treatment center, we can now understand why this organization was looking for the cloud backups. Another quick poll just to think about: does your organization currently back up data from cloud services to a third-party solution? Like, we can just see a show of hands. No hands. Good. So this is definitely the right event you guys are attending. Now let's talk about comparing your options when backing up data from the cloud. We believe the best strategy is to have a disaster recovery plan in place, whether it be cloud-to-cloud backup, where you don't have to worry about hardware maintenance, and allows for easy scalability, though this will have much higher operating costs. Or you can go with a local backup, which can significantly reduce long-term costs and provides you with full access on how your data is stored. Though this will require more time for initial hardware setup and of course long-term maintenance on that. So here's some other things to consider when creating your backup and disaster recovery plan. You want to check recovery options and make sure solutions satisfy your organization's recovery time objective. So you want to make sure that you're able to figure out exactly how long you guys can actually be down without the access to this type of data. You want to also be prepared for any type of future requirements and evaluate your long-term costs and potential growth of each solution to accommodate any future needs that might arise. You also want to keep in mind how easy it would be for your admin to handle the management of the solution. And you want to make sure that the backup solution integrates well with existing account management tools. Now let's look at how you can prepare for a natural disaster if one were to strike. Now have your Microsoft 365 data backed up to a local site. And if accounts and content are removed over time, this site is essentially your only full copy of the organization's data. And if your data gets hit by a hurricane, fire, or any other event, that data is ultimately gone. This is why we also recommend to have a secondary backup in place so that way you are prepared for any situation that might arise. And some best practices and takeaways we can take from deploying this backup solution is to regularly verify your backups. So you want to set aside time and verify backups at least one department per month. And then also set schedule to verify backups of all departments and that make sure that they're verified at least once per year. So I wanted to wrap things up today by telling you a little bit about us. If you're not familiar with Synology, we are a NAS manufacturer that develops software solutions for managing your data. And we've been around for over 20 years and have deployed a total over 11 million installations worldwide. We have created tools to make it simple and easy to add protections to all of your critical data. And one of those tools that we will highlight today is Active Backup from Microsoft 365. With our Active Backup solutions, you're going to be able to back up the cloud data stored in Microsoft 365 so that in the event of a disaster, you're going to be able to recover your data and be back up and running. And best of all, our backup solutions are completely unlimited and license-free, so there are no additional costs or per user fees. All you have to pay for is the hardware and storage. Now, let's dive into one of our NAS units and show you just how easy it is to protect your Microsoft 365 data. Perfect. So this is our DSM environment and one of our NAS units, this station manager. From here, we're going to go ahead and head over to our package list. And we're going to go ahead and access Active Backup from Microsoft 365. So from this interface, you're going to be able to see essentially the main overview and look into all of your current protected services. So at this time, we do have some current protections running for OneDrive, Mail, SharePoint, Contacts, Calendars, and of course, Teams. Now with these protections, they're currently set up for our students at the moment. So what we're going to do is set up protections for our faculty accounts. So we're just going to go ahead and head to the task list, hit create, and we're going to create a backup task. We're going to set it for Microsoft 365. Here's we'll just simply create a customized certificate password. Hit next. And then as you can see, you're going to get a pop-up and get a prompt to log into that 365 account. And then we're going to just log right in. Once you log right in, you're going to be prompted to essentially allow permissions to be accepted or Active Backup 365 to link with Microsoft's 365. And hit accept. And then lastly, it's just to agree to the terms of services here for 365 backup. And we're going to hit agree. So now essentially it's going through the process of registering with the Azure AD application and initializing that initial handshake between the two services. Once the authentication has been successfully completed, it's going to generate a certificate. Now, this certificate's important. You want to download this and keep this on the side. It'll keep record of that initial handshake, just in case you ever have to re-upload it to Azure. All right. So once we have that linked, you're going to be able to actually pull the information within that faculty's accounts. And then here's where you can go ahead and set up the naming policy, so that way you can differentiate each of your backups. So for this particular one, we'll set this for the faculty. And then we're going to select the backup destination on this local NAS here. And we're going to set it up for Microsoft 365 backups here. And then you also have the option to enable a localized recovery portal. So that way, if you wanted your users to be able to go in and recover data on their own without the need of an admin, you can enable that access point from here as well if needed. I'm going to hit next. Right. Here's essentially where you're going to be able to pull the information here. And then also, this is essentially the information needed to request access for the entirety of your team's backup. Once you submit that request form, it'll allow full access for the entirety of team's backup. So make sure you want to copy that data over. The next page here is essentially going to let you do auto discovery of all of your all of your data that's stored within that 365 account, and then you can pick and choose exactly what aspects of the backup and what scope you really want to back up to. So we want to make sure everything is selected here as far as from OneDrive, Calendar, and of course Teams, and any new sites that might be created after the fact. And what's really great is once this is actually set with the domain, any new users that you add on to this 365 account, they will automatically be enrolled in this backup plan. The next page here is where you're actually going to be able to set up your automated retention policies. So the automated scheduling and also the retention policies. So for this particular schedule, we definitely want to set it. And you have to have the option to go ahead and run these daily. So let's do that, of course, with the day-to-day operations. And then you can also set your initial time for when you want your first backups to run, and also when you would want them to potentially end. So let's say for a typical work day, you can start things at 6:30 in the morning. And we want to go ahead and make sure that our backups are updated up to every hour. So you can have that full control, whether it be hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. And then we want the backups to ultimately finish, right? Let's say by the end of the day, around like 8:30 or such. We're going to go ahead and hit OK here. And then on the retention policies, so this is very important with our tool here. You're actually able to take multiple versions of these backups. So this is where it really comes in handy in the event of, like, say, accidental deletion, where, like, say you deleted a file from like an hour previously or the day before. We make it very easy to just snap back to that previous version and recover any of that deleted data. So for this particular backup, we'll just set it to keep that retention for 30 days. So we'll have 30 days of versioning available that we can snap back to. And now, and all of those versions in this with this type of schedule will be set up in hourly increments. The last page here is ultimately just going to be a confirmation page. You want to just make sure everything that you set up as far as your settings, your backup tasks, retention, and scheduling is all matching exactly with what your requirements are and your needs. Everything all in all looks good. So we're going to go ahead and hit done. And then here's where you actually have the option to initiate that first backup right away, or you could just skip that. Say if you're in a peak period of time and you want to save on your bandwidth, you can skip this for now, and then ultimately the backup task will begin on the next scheduled time. We'll set that up for now. Okay, perfect. And just like that, your backup task is fully initiated and your Microsoft 365 data is fully protected. So you have no more worries. Once it's been initiated and set up the first time, it'll automatically run these backup tasks to this local NAS here. So let's head back over to our bit here. All right. So I wanted to finish up today's session with a quote from another one of our clients, Horn, a medical equipment manufacturer based in the UK. They stated that active backup not only keeps 2,400 of their inboxes safe, but it also saved them over $60,000 annually in their costs. So now we'll open up the floor to any questions from today's session. Jason, do we have anything that came in on your end?
We can give it a moment and see if there's any additional questions. I have Manpreet keeping an eye on the Q&A, but while we wait, the Teams backup. So, like, what are the limitations there in terms of that backup? I know it's the SharePoint backend, so that the data should be fine, but what about things like chat?
Or Teams backup? Essentially, yeah, so it can protect the data stored in OneDrive, business, and also the SharePoint Online. So it doesn't back up the chat or the conversations currently generated in Teams.
Okay. And do you need, like, I guess you need certain licenses, M365 plans?
We're essentially with that initial handshake, when you're making that initial link, you're able to get that connection once you do that initial login. And then as far as like getting the other information within Teams, you're submitting that form with that copy like we went over on the demo to essentially get that other access.
And Preet here, make sure there isn't anything else coming through. What about like performance? Are there any like performance issues when you're dealing with like different sizes of company or data or anything like that?
Yeah, so if you have less than 500 users, you're probably good to go. But honestly, if you have more, I would definitely recommend giving us a call for a consult and making sure that everything can match up with any of those like larger requirements.
Okay. All right, let's see. Does anybody in the audience have any questions? I'm thinking earlier when you were asking if people had backup plans.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure my company does. I just don't know what they do. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you delete a backup task for a user, does it delete the user's backup data?
No. So it will not delete data except through the essentially the retention policy that you already have in place. So depending on, like, say for that default policy that they were to have, like the one we set up in the demo was, I believe, for 30 days. So it would actually keep those multiple versions up to 30 days. And then if you wanted it to have to set it to where it would purge that data, you can have that option as well. But by the initials, it won't delete it except through this policy. Perfect. All right, so let's dive right in here. Awesome. So I wanted to just finish up things today with a reminder that we are definitely, providing one of our units that's actually capable of that backup tool that I just demoed for you guys, the DS220 Plus. So feel free to, if you get a chance, scan the QR code here, enter right into our survey. So that way you get a chance to win one of these, and you can try these out at home or with your business.
Yeah, I'm interested in getting one myself. I was looking into it last year, and I never circled back around, but I'm kind of running out of storage on some of my cloud storage accounts. So I was looking into possibly plugging it into my router and kind of making it like a network storage for us at home here.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's for home usage. Use it to store all your photos locally. It's protected. You know where your data is. It's not often like the cloud at some data center. It's actually like your own private cloud at home.
Yeah. Yes, I was looking into that. Really, it came up again recently because my wife, she's kind of maxed out her storage on her phone, and I could not figure out why. It turns out it was an app. There was one app in there that was inexplicably taking half of her storage. But I kept trying to get her to use cloud storage, and she kind of does, but she still doesn't get rid of the stuff on her phone because she's afraid of losing things. So that's when we started revisiting the idea of just getting something at home where she can at least feel a little more comfortable about having multiple places to store it.
Yeah, most definitely. And that's and of course, as we were going through the presentation here, is really that idea of like, you're sure you have it also protected, but then also you want to have multiple copies of that same data, because you don't know one site will go down, or you get hit by the hurricane, fire, flood, what have you. You're ultimately protected on all fronts.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, I think, near the beginning of the session there. Yeah, most people just assume that Microsoft will back up everything for you. They back up to a point, but if you need something from a long time ago, it may not be there if something happens on their end.
You definitely don't want to rely too much on their on their retention policies there.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it's definitely limited. And like I said, even when we went over just their terms of service, I mean, they're even letting you know, like, get a third-party solution for that additional backup, because if anything goes off, they're not going to be liable for that.
Right.
All right.
So one additional question here, like, how do you go about sizing the storage requirements for a company?
So as far as how much storage they're going to be needing, like, per user?
Yeah, like how do you go about, like, I guess if you're working with an organization who's looking into this and they're trying to figure out how much storage to have, they're like, how do you go about doing that? Like, what's the rule of thumb that you would use for the amount of storage required for each of the devices?
Yeah, it's really gonna depend on the deployment in the environment. So if like say most of like say the storage within an inbox, and essentially we essentially try to guesstimate like on the storage per the end users, and ultimately from there we're able to kind of develop that solution and build out that storage array, on one of our units. So typically we're able to kind of get an idea on like what the actual like storage usage is from 365. And then from there, we want to take into account anything for like potential versions, but then also we want to take growth in mind, for like how many users they may grow out to. And ultimately, if like, say if they end up taking on more projects, it's of course going to lead to more storage requirements. So typical baseline though, we always set up, we plan for, what their immediate need is, based on their storage requirements. And then a good starting point is, ultimately like double, just to take into account any potential, versioning or any potential growth from that standpoint. And then normally when we build out our solutions, we usually put into mind at least, up to like say a 3 or 5 year plan. What does your growth look like at that kind of scale?
Okay. So I guess you would continually interact with that customer and reassess those 3 to 5 years and sizing requirements or recommendations.
Yeah, most definitely. Yep. Yeah, like we have a fully dedicated, support teams that works with our clients, from pretty much the, from like post deployment on the pre deployment and then up to the post deployment, and of course any options for follow up down the road as well. Okay. We're here to help you guys essentially A to Z throughout your entire deployment.